Welcome to Canterbury Cast, the podcast where you'll find sermons, conversations, and all things Canterbury UMC. We're glad you're here.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Haley Smith, your host today, and we're talking about Ash Wednesday, what it means, why it matters, and how we begin the season of Lent together here at Canterbury. This year, we're offering several ways to participate throughout the day, including a morning drive-through option, a chapel service at noon, and a very special evening blues service in Canterbury Center. Today, I'm joined by Keith Thompson, our senior pastor, Rick Owen, pastor and coordinator of this year's blues service, and Eleanor Christiansen, our kids ministry director. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Good. Keith, let's go ahead and get started with a very big question.
Okay.
What is Lent?
In a nutshell.
Yeah, let's summarize.
What is Lent, and why does Ash Wednesday matter so much in the life of the church?
Yeah, it's a great question and a big question. You're right. Lent is one of our seasons in the Christian calendar year, and this is one where we really try to focus in on how we're living as a life of faith, who we are. And Ash Wednesday is the beginning of all of this. We really begin to reflect on our time in our life and how we're related to God and what's our relationship with one another and with God throughout all of this. And Ash Wednesday, by marking ourselves with ashes, we're reminded that we're both given life by God and that through this life by God, we have a time frame that we're here in life. And how do we use this time? What do we do with it? And what does that relationship look like for us? And so it's really both a kind of humble reminder of who we are in a life of this, but also this beautiful invitation to recognize the gift and graces of God in our lives and that we don't walk through this life alone. We walk through with God.
There's something really grounding about the beginning of Lent.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's kind of a humbling thing, and sometimes we don't like to think about stuff like this. You know, we have to kind of slow ourselves down and really be intentional to wade into this because our tendency is to stay busy and in some ways live in denial of what we face within our lives and the things we struggle with in life. And Ash Wednesday and Lent in and of itself are just great ways of putting ourselves back into a really truthful path in our life. And how do we deal with this, and how do we live our life as people of faith?
Sure. Could you, Keith, go ahead and walk us through our Ash Wednesday lineup and what's happening at Canterbury on February 18th?
Yeah, we've got a nice variety in everything we're doing for Ash Wednesday. First, we begin 7 to 8:30. We have a drive-through opportunity to have ashes imposed upon you. And this is going to be over in the chapel parking lot in the porte-cochere near there. And it's just an opportunity, particularly for people headed to work or maybe going to school, that they can come through, have ashes imposed on their forehead or on their hand, whichever they prefer in that, and also just a quick word that they get to have. And it's just a really wonderful start to the day for many people. Second, we have a noonday service. That happens in the chapel, and that's about a 30, 45-minute service of us gathering in there. The imposition of ashes is a part of that, along with music and reflection on Scripture and Word and what our journey's like. And then the final one is a 6 p.m. in Canterbury Center that is a blues service. We did this for the first time last year, and Rick Owen will have more to share on this, but it was just a really meaningful, powerful service to be a part of. And we moved into Canterbury Center because the chapel was so full last year. We want to make sure we've got room for everybody, and it's such a great space in Canterbury Center to be able to do this service. So we're excited about all three of those options.
Great option. So Rick, let's talk about that 6 p.m. blues service. What makes it different than the other services?
Sure. Well,
The blues actually is a reflection of kind of Ash Wednesday and of Lent. The blues as a whole begins with a recognition of there's some things that we can change, and there are things that hurt, and if I say that loud enough, then God does something about it. In fact, I had a great experience of spending 2 hours with Pinetop Perkins, 92-year-old blues icons many years ago. And I asked him, why do you do the blues? You can play anything in the world. He's a pianist. He said, the blues is saying out loud what's hurting down deep inside and hoping God and somebody will do something about it. So Ash Wednesday begins with that understanding that, there's some things we can change, some things that will be different. And so this blues service will actually follow almost a journey of Lent, beginning with things that, yes, here's some things we can change, the recognition of ashes imposed, and then also wonderful blues music. Our own band and others will be singing. We hopefully will have, waiting today to hear from one of our blues performers to be here to join Keith. It's a mixture of a little bit of homily, a little bit of blues, a little bit of homily, a little bit of blues. And so it works that way. In fact, the whole essence of the service is encompassed in one of my favorite blues songs, Shingle by Shingle. And it goes like this. He says, shingle by shingle, I'm patching up the roof. Shingle by shingle, I'm getting in the crop. There's new water in the well, and we're thankful for every drop. It's a movement from recognition of that dark place in our life, redemption, and moving forward to the power of God's presence in our lives.
And that's just a perfect fit for Lent.
That is Lent. That's the journey of Lent, just described. And Eric Bibb is a great person. Listen to his music. It's great.
Well, and it's fun to experience Ash Wednesday in a different venue where we're using music to help tell the story. So we are inviting kind of a different part of our human experience into the room when we're listening to music and we're letting it engage our emotions as well as our minds. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Rick, who do you hope attends this blues service?
I hope everyone that was here last year will join us again. We have a crew in the church that actually has been experiencing blues over the last year or so. And so that blues crew, we hope to see them there and be a part of that. They have a lot of fun, invite folks. I think if you've never been a part of a blues experience, it's something to come and enjoy. I also think that they'll be really exciting to hear some of our own folks who are very special. Last year, Lester Siegel and I kind of went together to write a song. That song is going to be a part of the service this year. It's actually a song written on the Psalm 51, which is the psalm used for Ash Wednesday every year in the liturgy. And so that'll be performed. So I think it's an opportunity for everyone to experience blues in a way. If you've experienced it before, maybe in a new way. If you haven't, come listen to the blues.
I also just think it's a great way to begin Lent, both with the blues side of that, but it brings an energy to what we're doing in this. And it's a beautiful way of blending both that which is sometimes focused on our mortality and our limitations on things, and at the same time, our beautiful ability to be able to express those same deep feelings that we have.
Absolutely. Saying out loud what's hurting deep inside.
There you go.
And knowing that God's going to do something about it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great service. Let's switch gears just a little bit. Eleanor, how do you help our kids and our families understand what's going on Ash Wednesday and just Lent
in general? Yeah. Lent, I kind of think of it like spring training for disciples. Like the things that we think are important, the things that we want to get better at, we practice. And so the whole season of Lent becomes an opportunity for us to do those things that help us grow closer to God every single day. Not in a way that becomes like a list or like a must-do or taxing, but in a way that helps us think about how growing takes practice. So just like you go to soccer practice and get better at scoring a goal, just like you practice the piano at home when you want to try a whole new piece. We talk a lot in church during the season of Lent about some of the specific things that we can do to practice growing closer to God. So you might hear us talk about things like reading our Bibles and talking about the stories of God. You might hear us talking about practicing new ways to pray and talk to God. And all of those things are things that we can do our whole life long with God. They're not unique just to the season of Lent. But during the season of Lent, we give special attention to that practice time and think about how we can incorporate it into our daily lives after Lent too. So Ash Wednesday is like the big kickoff for us for Lent. And I think parents sometimes shy away from participating in Ash Wednesday with their kids for a few reasons. One is because it tends to be a more serious service. It tends to be a service because we're talking about our dependence on God, that we were made by God and that we will return to God after we die, because we're talking about mortality at times. That tends to be something that, at least myself as a parent, I don't really like thinking about. I don't like thinking about my children's mortality. So I think that's a natural parental instinct. We're geared to keep those kids alive. And so considering anything else feels very difficult. But I think if we flip the script a little bit and think about how to help our kids imagine that they are dependent on God, that the whole world is not revolving around them, and instead our world revolves around God and keeping God at the center, I think that can help us kind of move that emphasis off of mortalities specifically for kids, which honestly for our little kids doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. They are not developmentally ready to think about their mortality or anybody else's mortality for that matter. But I think if we can help them think about our dependence on God, how God enters into our story from the very beginning, and how God keeps showing up over and over again throughout our story, that I think that might be a more meaningful way to approach Ash Wednesday with our kids. And then because none of us learn everything about God or being a disciple or going to church all at once, we can just depend that as they are growing and learning, that these layers of like part of what we talk about and celebrate in Ash Wednesday will just they'll just keep showing up. It's like spiral learning for those that are in education. We just keep touching on some of these topics, and our kids will gradually build this foundation and understanding that kind of lifts from these very first experiences. I would say that I think it's really cool. There are a couple things reasons I think kids should be there. One, I think kids love feeling like they belong to something bigger than they are. So looking around the room and seeing adults wearing ashes just like they are wearing ashes is a sign of belonging.
Right.
And so I think it's just like at their baptism, when we mark them with the sign of the cross with water, we are celebrating with our whole church family that they belong to us and they belong to God. They belong to something bigger outside of themselves. And so this becomes a moment where, once again, like the water is not visible beyond that moment of baptism. And so this becomes a moment where they look around the room and see, this is the group of people that I belong to. And I think that is a very powerful message to share with our kids. And likewise, we are not marked with glitter. We're not marked with gold. We are marked with ashes. Exactly. Right. And so, I think the second big reason I think it's really important to have our kids be there is we are often practicing with our children that process of saying we're sorry. Like, we're trying to help our kids understand what it means to be humble and to examine the mistakes they make and to try and move towards a different story. And that is not unique to Ash Wednesday. That is our everyday life with kids, right? And it's my everyday life as an adult. And so I think there's something really powerful about seeing that these ashes, these signs of the messes in our life being on our forehead, and that they are looking around, and it's not just the kids that have the ashes on their forehead, but all the grown-ups are saying, yep, I make mistakes, and I'm in the same boat that you are, and there's something about that I think is really helpful for us as we have conversations with our kids beyond Ash Wednesday, and when we need to strike a note of humility with our kids when we make a mistake as a parent or an adult, adult, and we need to recognize that with our kids. This becomes kind of one of those images that might help them understand, like, the grown-ups in the world are struggling to make wise choices and kind choices just like I am, and we're all in this boat together. So I also think, thirdly, that starting with Ash Wednesday and doing your best to introduce your kids to all these ways that we celebrate Lent and the story of Easter together as a church family helps them have a beginning and an end to this in a meaningful way. If we shortchange our kids by not bringing them to these services where we're talking through what it means to depend on God for our next story, for the better story that's possible in our life, then Easter doesn't make sense. Like, if we are not thinking about how we need God to have a resurrection in our life, both figuratively and literally, like, Easter doesn't make sense. So just showing up for an Easter celebration doesn't help our kids grasp the fullness and the depth of God's love that is present and is celebrated and marked at all these other services. So as a parent and as the children's minister here at Canterbury, I just would encourage families to take a big jump, take a big leap, and see what happens and what kind of conversations could be started with your family by making these services a real priority for your family throughout our Lenten season.
Sure. I want to jump back to the ashes.
But I want to add something, because it's so beautifully said by Eleanor in all of this. One of the things I love when she talks about what's in it for kids is adults get to overhear that again and layer it in one more time into their own learning of this and recognizing that. And it's part of the beauty of all of it. And we set that great example for our kids as we're growing up. And we keep learning, and if we can help them recognize we're still learning this stuff too, there's a whole journey of us together in that. And I think Eleanor said that beautifully.
And that's part of what we promised together in those baptismal moments, right? We're going to do this life of faith together. And as a congregation, we promise to kids, hey, we're going to teach you the stories of Jesus. But there's this corresponding promise that goes with what children bring to the life of faith, with the joy and spontaneity and questions that prompt us to think more deeply about our lives too. Like, church is one of those beautiful places where intergenerational interaction actually helps us create these layers of meaning and purpose that aren't really possible in most other aspects of our lives.
That's so true. That is so true. Let's jump back and talk about the ashes and the significance. Rick,
Sure.
Would you take that one, please?
Absolutely. The ashes that we use are literally the burned palms from Palm Sunday. It's a part of the journey and the story from last year to this year. Those palms are then mixed with a little bit of oil and used almost, not a paste, but at least something that will make a mark and will be somewhat lasting through the day.
It'll have some sticking power.
Yeah. It'll have some sticking power.
Stay all day.
It usually takes, as a minister, it usually takes several days to get rid of the ashes off of your fingertips and clean. Don't wear a white shirt on that day when you're doing it. And it's interesting because the ashes are a visual element of Ash Wednesday, but there are other elements throughout Lent that do that as well. And in many ways, it's the Paschal mystery and the images that come from that. In Hebrew tradition, it's called Passover, and as a reaction to that also, for me, Ash Wednesday and children become almost an entrance of children into the story and the journey. That's the reason on the Passover night, the question becomes often from children, why is this night revered above all other nights? And when that happens, it's a way of saying, here's how we tell the story, and it is perpetuated throughout all of life and history. So Ash Wednesday becomes a bit of that, and the ashes are imposed, and this is why we do this and why we move through the Lenten season as a whole.
And I want to jump in. I think just drawing on that example, Rick, I think sometimes we as parents get really nervous about the questions that our kids might ask us that maybe we won't know the answer. Like maybe we haven't absorbed all the deep truths of Ash Wednesday ourselves. And so we might not explain it right. And I just want to invite you to be just as curious as your kids. And that's part of celebrating it together. It's part of following up with pastors and reading studying some of these things that we read during Ash Wednesday too that might help all of you grow together in this so that you don't feel like you have to be responsible for all the answers. Right. But the prompting from a child can be a really beautiful way for them to see the importance of their voice as a voice of faith in the family and for all of you to be equally curious. So I wanted to jump in on that. I also wanted to jump in on, for kids, one example of where ashes show up in our Bibles that you may have read about before is from the story of Jonah. If you remember, Jonah got swallowed up by the whale because he did not want to go talk to the Ninevites because he was mad at them and he wanted them to get in trouble with God. And God wanted Jonah to go tell them that, he was really unhappy and things were about to get rough. And so Jonah goes to the Ninevites reluctantly after, the whale spits him up onto the land and says, nope, you got to do this. He goes into the city and says, all right, God's really unhappy with you, and I think things are going to get sad here. And the people of Nineveh, instead of being mad at Jonah, or instead of trying to justify the things that they had been doing, instead they said they were sorry. And part of what they did was mark themselves with ashes as an outward sign of what they were experiencing inside, that something that they realized that they had made a mistake, which we all do as human beings, and that in turn they wanted to have an outward sign of how sorry they were and that they wanted to turn from that mistake. They wanted to repent from that mistake and do a different thing. And God forgives them because that is what God does. And so I think that story can be a really helpful entrance into the conversation about ashes and why we talk about it and what repentance looks like with our kids, because that is a story that's familiar to them.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, I would love for just each of you to offer a word of encouragement or a brief invitation to our Ash Wednesday lineup.
Yeah, the Ash Wednesday beginning of Lent to me is just such an essential part of life and journey. And it is that part we often don't allow ourselves to do, to kind of sit in the darkness of it and to recognize what it means to sit there and to be there. And at the same time, fully acknowledge, hey, God is still with us in the middle of this as we journey through it. So I just think there's such a cornerstone depth in Ash Wednesday that's a part of strong faith throughout the entire journey of our lives. And so I really think it's an essential service for us.
Rick?
Yeah, my great-grandfather used to talk to me often when I was growing up, telling me about how important Lent was and how important Ash Wednesday was. And so that's a part of my experience of faith, actually. But he used to say something that I will never forget. He said, it's okay to give something up for Lent, but never give something up for Lent that you don't take something on in its place. So for Lent, for me, is taking something on the journey, and it begins with Ash Wednesday. So I hope everyone will come with us and take on Ash Wednesday as a first step into a journey that takes us all the way to Good Friday and eventually to Easter.
Yeah, and just following up, I would say, anytime we have a worship service that is novel, that doesn't feel like our regular Sunday gig, anytime that we get to involve all of our senses, I think those are amazing moments for kids to lock in and engage. And so I really want to encourage you to take a chance, and if you have not attended an Ash Wednesday service with your kids, I hope that you will give this one a try. I think the avenue of some of the story being told through music is appealing to kids. I think there are going to be different things that are going to make them wonder, and it might make you wonder too. And I think that posture of being curious is a wonderful way to start the season of Lent.
And I'll just add that on Ash Wednesday, dinner will be served from 5 to 6 in Canterbury Hall. So
you're right there.
Bring the family.
Absolutely.
And enjoy being with others, and just come have dinner just prior to the Blue service. It'll be a great night. Again, Ash Wednesday is February the 18th, and we invite you to join us for any of our services that we've got lined up. Thank you for listening to Canterbury Cast. I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about what's going on at Canterbury, follow us on social media. or visit our website at canterburyumc.org.